Olean and wicked regards to those who care and dare to listen. I'm here today recording on the 20th of July, 2022, and the title of this talk is War of Games. Now, this is not an amateur preview, but it is a complete talk, which I'm dedicating to the new approach that I'm taking in how to deliver Gnostic intel and the Sophianic message to the world. War of Games. Have you heard that particular three-word phrase before? Maybe not. It resonates or clicks with things that you certainly have heard. For instance, World of Warcraft, Game of Thrones, or obviously war games. You've heard about war games, right? What does the term war game mean, technically? Well, it means a trill or simulation of a war scenario. For instance, you heard the rumor, certainly, that there is a war in Ukraine, an actual war involving people, bombs, death, airplanes, the whole enchilada. But it's possible that the so-called war in Ukraine has already been simulated or rehearsed in a drill, and that also is a war game. And of course, you know that those war games are played out on computers. So they are virtual versions of actual wars that might occur. And that's the correct definition of war game. So what is the war of games? Well, I've said it is essentially, fundamentally, and basically one thing. It is the mother dream versus the morgues. But I have a lot more to say about that. And I'm going to do my best to get it across to you in this talk. What I would like to do, it would give me pleasure, and especially if I find out that it does improve and increase the outreach of my work to present the living gnosis today and to present the Sophianic way of life, well, then I would be doing something I haven't done before. To accomplish that goal, I would be, let's say, striking memes. Striking memes in the way that you strike a chord or you strike a nerve. I do intend to strike a nerve with this meme, War of Games. Do you want to play War of Games? And so I want to see how I can advance my intention to teach in a better and more far-reaching way. And before I do that, I'm going to offer a kind of disclaimer. You could call it a personal disclosure. And what is my reason for doing that? Well, it's not because I have any hidden agenda. As a matter of fact, if I state a personal disclosure here openly and publicly on the internet, my only motive is transparency. And I do place a very high value on transparency. And you may know that from a talk I gave about internet spiritual gurus, I stated a challenge to such people, and I said, reveal yourself. If you're authentic and your spiritual teaching is valid and honest and true and well-intended, well, reveal yourself. So I'm going to reveal myself now by way of walking the talk and standing up to my own rules. Now, I want to advise you that I'm not asking for anyone's sympathy here, and I'm not, let's say, exhibiting what people call, special pleading. There are special conditions for my case, and I'm pleading for your understanding and sympathy. No, I'm not doing that. I don't need your sympathy. I don't care if you're sympathetic with me or not. But I do believe, I am convinced, that it would be helpful if I told you this. You see, I suffer from a certain condition. I won't go into the gruesome details, and I won't name it. But I'll tell you that it is a natal condition, and that it is not vaccine-induced, nor is it induced by any kind of mind control program to which I've been exposed. I'm not an MK Ultra victim, and I don't suffer from borderline personality or multiple personality syndrome. But I do have a natal condition. Now, on the one hand, I consider it to be a privilege to have this condition. I regard it as a gift of the highest order. And due to having this condition, I am able to do things that ordinary people who are called neurotypical by those who have this condition simply cannot do. I ask you, honestly, how many teachers on the internet are running a full spectrum university of 18 different courses covering quite a vast amount of different subjects, from romanticism and literature, poetry, to biomysticism, to astronomy, astronomical physics, to the calculation of the world ages, to alchemy, to the Sophianic view of life, and on and on. How many people are doing that? That's not an ordinary thing to do. It is an extremely advanced demonstration of multitasking. And it so happens that my condition allows me to do that. There are, however, or there have been, particular handicaps of this condition. And I'm going to bring up one now because it's relevant. You see, for a greater part of my life, I was not able to read social cues in the way that ordinary or normal people do. So if you put me into a social situation of any level, among working class people, among affluent people, among members of the European aristocracy, among college students, put me in any situation in the past, and you would see that I had a handicap because I cannot detect and decode social clues and cues which are obvious to ordinary people. And also, another way to say that is that words have denotations and connotations. I've often made this distinction. So what a word denotes is its exact and particular meaning, like racism. But what a word connotes is different. And the way that language works in social discourse among human animals is that the connotations of words are far more powerful than the denotations. And I was unable for a good part of my life to read those connotations. So I would be in front of a group of people giving a lecture or in a social situation where I had the occasion once to address about 30 members of the high French and Belgian nobility, when I said things to them that had connotations for them of which I was entirely oblivious. And just a little anecdote, in that particular situation, there was a priest present, and later on, sitting around the tables when we were having a meal and conversing, I heard the priest at another table say, "We've burned people for less than that." Well, I didn't know exactly what he was referring to, but obviously he heard connotations in what I said. I was talking about the legend of the Grail, that I was unaware of, you see. So that has been a major handicap for me in my social transactions. And I've behaved inappropriately and poorly in many social situations in the past due to that handicap. Now, I invite you to focus a moment on this really important issue about connotations. Here are some words: elite, grail, holy grail, syndicate, aristocracy, victim. Now, you could look up the definitions of those words, and a good dictionary will tell you what they denote, but no dictionary will tell you what they connote. So, for instance, if I am standing in an auditorium with you physically present, and my intention is to give you, to present a lecture or talk about aristocracy, well, you are sitting there in the audience, and that word has connotations for you. But in delivering my talk, I might not take them into account. Can you see how dubious that can be, how dangerous that can be? I'm using terms that other people read in a way that I am ignoring due to my handicap. And it's well known that people with this condition cannot read ordinary social cues. Well, that's the past, my friends. That's the way I used to be. I'm different now. And if there's anybody listening now, if there's any chance that anyone who knew me 10 or 20 years ago might be listening, let me assure you that I'm different and I can read social cues and connotations in a fraction of a second. And I can see exactly how they play in the minds of other people. And I know exactly how to use them and spin them for my purposes. So it's quite a triumph for me to be able to do this, because it represents the fact, it demonstrates the fact that I have, in fact, overcome a major handicap of those who suffer from, or you could say, who enjoy my condition of being not neurotypical. All right, fine. Enough said on that issue. Now I invite you to return to this theme, meme, motif, whatever you want to call it. War of games, right? And contained in that term is the unique meme in one word, mother dream, which could be put out in the world, maybe, who knows, stranger things have happened, as hashtag mother dream. But what would happen if it went out into the world in that way, with a hashtag attached? Well, the hashtag, as you know, is an Archontic or IT tool that's used to propagate memes. And the social media platforms by which that is done are what? YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, and even, goddess knows, TikTok. Now, I'm not on any of those platforms except YouTube. I have almost no social media footprint. I've never been on Telegram or Twitter. And as far as I know, those who follow my work faithfully, honestly, and accurately have not attempted to put out what I say and teach through the expression of memes on those platforms. But suppose they did. Suppose that started to happen. For instance, suppose the meme of Mother Dream went out on TikTok. And then over time, in certain number of days or weeks, as time went by, TikTok, Kali Yuga, counting down, second by second, well, suppose that they propagated and spread in some way. This would be entirely new. This has so far, since 2008, when I introduced Planetary Tantra, this has so far never happened. But Olin, the moment for a change of heart is at hand. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock is ticking. If you compare the current kalpa, or great cosmological day measured by the precession of the equinoxes, which is 25,920 years, to a human day, then we would be living in the last 10 minutes of that day. The clock is ticking, and the time is running out to the end of Kali Yuga in 2216 of the current calendar. Now, at this point, I'm going to refer directly to a comment that showed up in that upload on the Mother Dream versus the Morgues. It's a comment from Forrest Little, an individual. Now, I appreciate this input. I think it's important because what he expresses may be similar to or identical to how others react to certain things I say. He says, John, I have an observation, which is my uneasiness with the word dream, as it connotes something false to my ears. I recognize the traditions in various parts of the world explaining that dreams are very real, that reality can be understood as a dream, etc. And yet I have this aversion to the word along lines of the competing narratives of simulation theory. I'm reading his words here so as not to misrepresent him or falsely allege in violation of the ninth commandment that he's saying something that in fact he doesn't say or doesn't intend to say. So he goes on and he says, you talk about Sophia's experiment, correction. To me, these words compete well with the word creation on a mimetic level. I'd love more words on defining the meaning of the word dream as it relates to a description of what our existence is. And I also simply share my self-observation for what it is. I'm stuck in a dream, quote. Then that experience flows into the competing narratives of what we are, like the narrative that our individual divine sparks can develop and become independent of the dream, and some appeals to authority beyond Sophia. Perhaps this is a talk better had on Nematta, but I'm here commenting, thank you for all you do for humanity. Okay? Direct quote. I'm going to address this, as I said, because it raises issues that may come up in others' minds as well. And I want to address those issues, or possible issues, to clear the course ahead so that that course is open and unobstructed. In the first place, I'm not disputing or refuting anything that Forrest Little says. I'm not here to criticize him or discount what he says in any way. I'm only here to make observations based on his exact words in that comment. My first observation is that traditions in various parts of the world explaining that dreams are very real, that reality can be understood as a dream, raise certain questions. Well, dreams are not real. Your dreams are not real. So if you dream that you're on a cruise on the Caribbean, and in fact, you never in your life have you ever been on such a cruise, then as a sane individual, you realize that the dream of the cruise is not real, you have not really gone on a cruise. Easy distinction to make. And that is true of our dreams. Our dreams are not real. But there is one exception. There is a dream that is real, but it's not yours. You're not dreaming it. And what I've said over and over again is that the Sophiatic message tells you that you are living in a real, multidimensional, sensorial, provable, material dream. It's not a metaphor. You're actually living in the dream of the indwelling consciousness of the planet, which Gnostics call, among various names, the Aeon Sophia. So your life is an incident in a process of aeonic dreaming, which is absolutely and utterly real. Aeonic dreaming is as real as everything that happens in the natural world. Rain, clouds, thunderstorms, floods, the tides, the presence of the forests, all the animals, insects, reptiles, birds, the presence of the seas, all of that is material and empirically real. It's the same whether you're there or not. It's subjectively verifiable, and so is the aeonic dream of Sophia. How can I make it more clear than that? Now, regarding certain allusions in his comment, which, as I say, I'm addressing because they could be illusions that arise in anyone's mind, there is an allusion to the long-standing traditions that speak of life as a dream, as if it were a dream, or actually is a dream. One of those comes out of Hindu mythology from Asia, from the legacy of Asian mysticism, which is deep and profound. And you find it in the metaphor or meme of the dreaming of Vishnu. On the other side of the world, down under, you find the Altaringa, the old stone time, or the dream time of the Australian Aborigines. So this meme is nothing new. I use it in a particular and precise way. Now, in concluding my comment on this comment on my YouTube channel, I refer you specifically and vividly to this phrase. The narrative that our individual divine sparks can develop and become independent of a dream, and some appeals to authority beyond Sophia, end quote. You see, that allusion reveals to me, because I read the connotations and cues in the language, that in the mindset of the individual who made that comment, there is a program, and that is a Talmudic conception of the world reality. Now, it's extremely unfortunate, and I've often commented on this, that people such as Greg Braden and Graham Hancock, who was a colleague of mine, talk about Gnosticism not in the way that the Gnostics themselves would have explained it, but through the lens of a Talmudic view of reality. You see, Gnosticism does not teach, essential pagan Gnosticism does not teach that we are divine sparks caught in a nightmare, in some kind of matrix that is ruled over by a satanic overlord who is the creator of the material world, and that the purpose of life is to wake up out of that nightmare and escape from the satanic matrix. That is a Talmudic teaching. That is not a Gnostic teaching. So, for sure, I can assure you that the living dream of the Aeon Sophia is not a nightmare matrix where you are trapped, where your divine spark is trapped in such a way that you need to escape from that dream and escape from the experiment that she has set up for human animals, and in some way reach a state of mind where you conceive or encounter some authority beyond Sophia. There is no authority beyond Sophia, and I might add that Sophia is not an authority. Sophia is an agency of divine, cosmic, supernatural power present to you in the phenomena of the natural world, and equally so present in the phenomena of your own psyche, such as attention, memory, imagination, reverie, and more. So the presence of the Aeon Sophia is not only beneath your feet in the solid earth and all around you in the atmospheric envelope of the earth, but it is also present in your psyche. Nature and psyche are a unity, and they both spring co-emergently from the fountainhead of the supernatural, which is the source of the natural. And in the supernatural, there is an archontic, alien, or paranormal factor. Yes, the Gnostic teachers uniquely warned us about this. But they also said explicitly that the Archontic overlord, Yaldabaoth, or the demiurge, or Satan, or Lucifer, as it is wrongly named, but often named, is not the ruler of the world. It is not the power that creates and sustains the material world. It only pretends to be so. So the Archontic overlord, the demiurge, is a demented alien who pretends to be the lord of the world and pretends to be the creator of the world. And it is so unfortunate that people who discuss publicly the message of Gnosticism do not make this point. They miss the basic connotation of the word demiurge. They take it literally to mean a satanic power that created the material world. But that is not what the Gnostics say. That's not what I say. I say, as you know, and how many times do I have to say it? In how many tunes and chords and scales, that the material world is absolutely and completely real. It is a setting for a divine experiment, and it is sustained by and is the direct expression of the dreaming activity of a divine feminine power called Shakti, Gaia, Sophia. Have I said that before? Can I say it any more clearly than that? Now, I realize here that, as often occurs, and I'm acutely aware of this, that the issue of semantics comes into teaching Gnosis. Now, I am really keen on this issue of semantics, and I would like you as well to be so. So someone objected, and others may object, that the terms dream and game connote unreality. So how can I use them to describe reality as it really is? How can I use them to describe the true, empirical, provable conditions of our existence if they connote something that is not real? How can I do that? Well, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I would like you to know as well. So I'm going to take this occasion to introduce something to you that you probably have never heard before. I'm pretty sure you haven't. I've never encountered it anywhere before. I first brought it up many years ago in a course I gave in Santa Fe on what I would now call Gaian alchemy, eco-psychology. And I used this word specifically, and I defined it. I gave the denotation of this term, which is functional metaphor or functional symbol. Have you ever heard that expression? So what is a functional symbol? Well, go on the internet and search for alchemical tree. And you will come up with a vast amount of material and illustrations from medieval alchemy in the West, in which it's a system in which the alchemical tree is one of, say, the 5 or 6 primary motifs, and there are a large number of other secondary motifs, such as the green lion eating the sun, or the pelican biting its own breast. These are alchemical images. But of all these, the first one that you need to investigate is the alchemical tree. And so if you do that, what do you find? Well, you find it defined. This is the denotation. It's a meme or image in alchemy, an archetype, if you will, that describes the web of life, the symbiosis of life. Life is a tree. Life grows like a tree. Ancestral lineages evolve and emerge like from roots to like branches and leaves on a tree. So the symbol or metaphor of the alchemical tree can be used in many ways. But hold on a minute. Is it merely a symbol and a metaphor? Or is it something else as well? A functional metaphor, like the alchemical tree, describes something in an abstract or symbolic way, but at the same time, it describes it in a literal way. So I ask you this question. What is the difference between the alchemical archetype of the alchemical tree and an actual tree? What is the difference? Well, in the correct view, there is no difference. Because a real actual tree is an instrument or organ in the symbiotic web of life, of which the alchemical tree is an archetypal version. So in every case where you encounter a functional symbol or metaphor, you have to look at it with double vision. You see on the one hand that it's a useful metaphor, and humans use metaphors as part of their linguistic and conceptual faculties, normally, routinely. But at the same time, it is actually something in the world, something material, instrumental in the phenomena of nature. Thus, the alchemical tree. Every tree you see is an alchemical tree. Take the metaphor of neural web. That's a functional metaphor. You can say, yeah, the neurological system of the human animal, as well as other animals, is like a web. And you can talk about it as if it were a web. But then when you go and look at what it actually literally is, well, it is a web, you see? So neural web is a functional symbol. Now, there are not a lot of functional symbols, and many of the metaphors and archetypes and symbols that you encounter in world mythology and various occult systems are not functional. It's only functional if the symbolic or metaphoric part has a counterpart in the actual world or in the human psyche. So there you have what I consider to be a lovely and precise and extremely instructive tool of gnosis or applied noetics. And yes, you're welcome. So in bringing this talk around to its conclusion, I simply want to highlight and emphasize what I'm already saying. The use of the terms dream and game demonstrate functional metaphors. The dream is a dream. It's not yours, it's her dream. It's also a reality. The game is a game. It's not your game. It's a game you play, the Archontic game. And that is also a human reality. You see, the dream and the game of which I speak are not mere figures of speech. They are realities to be seen in actual human behavior. For instance, morgues are role-playing games, right? RPG. But they are played in the virtual world. They are not played externally in the social world, outside, on the street, in the park, in stores, wherever you go. But nevertheless, you could define life as a role-playing game. Everyone plays roles in life, right? So when you look at gamers, what do you see? Well, obviously, I don't care much for what I see. Now, I can accept that maybe people would play these online multiplayer virtual reality games as a form of entertainment and distraction from time to time. But if those who play those games find themselves or put themselves in a mindset where they prefer living in the virtual to living in the actual, then they have a big problem. And it's not just a problem with me that I don't like it or respect it that they do that, but they have a serious problem in their own lives. But let's just focus on that group. It's sometimes called the fandom of RPGs, or the community of online gamers, right? So there are millions of people around the world playing those games right now. And obviously, they are in a physical situation somewhere. They are living in real life as human animals. They are in a chair somewhere. Maybe it's a special chair. And they have other accessories like the console, the Xbox, the peripherals, the touchpad, the headphones. So they're in the real world, hooked up to these accessories and looking at the monitor, and that's the only way they can play in the virtual. So they're both in the real or actual and in the virtual at the same time. But unfortunately, for them, the preference of their experience goes to the virtual over the actual. But hold on a second. Those people, those gamers, are only the tip of the iceberg. They're actually a symptom of something else, which is far worse. You may be aware of the distinction between a morgue or an online role-playing game and LARPing. So LARPing stands for live action role-playing. So what is the difference? Well, when people engage in LARPing, they're not hooked up necessarily to an electronic console looking at a screen. They LARP right out there in public in the ordinary world. And cosplay, I suppose, is a version of LARPing. Is it fair to say that? So to LARP means to role play some fantasy character, but to do it in society, in the actual world. So that's the difference between LARPing and gaming with morgues, right? Am I clear? Have I stated it correctly? Now here you get to the real issue. Here you get to a description of what the Gnostics called the Archontic infection. What the living gnosis today teaches is that the human experiment on Earth, involving all those human animals who live within the biosphere of the Earth, which is the material production of Sophia's dreaming, are subject to a malicious paranormal influence, which explains the origin of evil in human behavior. And when I say that some human animals are infected with a virus from outer space, that is exactly what I mean. It's not a metaphor. It is a literal denotation of the human condition. So when you look at people in the world, in any social situation, whether it be intimate one-on-one, family, neighborhood, community, the nation, you can observe, if you have the Gnostic intel working, you can observe that certain of those people, those tads, are exhibiting behavior symptomatic of the Archontic infection. Now, how would you compare those people? And I'll give them a name in a moment. How would you compare those people to gamers who are playing morgues? Well, as I said before, in order to play the morgue, you have to have all these accessories and you have to be hooked up to a console and a monitor. But those who are LARPing out in the real world, live action role-playing, do not have to be hooked up to any console. Although, if you observe their behavior, you will see that most of them are hooked up to IT devices. For instance, they are hooked up to iPads and iPhones and camera phones, and they use them excessively. And in many cases, now, considering the advanced stage of the Archontic infection, they couldn't run their lives or get through a day without dependence on these devices. So there is kind of a carryover. Those who are LARPing out there openly in society are also dependent upon certain accessories, right? So it has been said, and I think it's fair to say, that gaming is an addiction. But those who exhibit that addiction are merely a minor symptom of those who exhibit the Archontic infection, which is massively multiplayed around the world continuously. And what is the core dynamic of the Archontic infection? Well, it's pretending. Remember that the demiurge pretends to be the creator of the material world and the Lord who rules over everything and presumably holds human beings trapped in that nightmare matrix, right? Well, those who are LARPing in the sense that I'm developing here are pretenders who go along with the pretending of the demiurge. They are actually unwitting accomplices to the demented illusions of the demiurge. So they pretend in their LARPing to do things that are completely unreal. You might recall, for instance, and here I'm getting close to a borderline issue, that a while ago, last year I think it was, a leader of one of the major countries in Europe said publicly, and it was announced in full-page displays on newspapers as well as on the mainstream media, he said, advised, urged people to act as if you have it. Pretend that you have it, even if you don't. Now, it can't get any more clear than that. Talk about the Archonic authorities showing their hand. They're actually showing their MO. They're actually revealing that they are just pretending, but they want you to play along and pretend according to the script or scenario that they have written for you. And you know the scenario to which I refer. So as a final clarification, I more or less like the way this is going. So let's see if I can wind it up on a wicked note. As a final clarification, I would say that those human animals who are infected, not just addicted, they're addicted to their archonic devices like iPhones, but they are also infected with the archonic virus. And what they are doing is pretending what? What are they pretending to do? Well, they're not pretending that they have a virus from outer space operating in their minds and in their neurological systems. They're not pretending. That is, in fact, the truth. That is the brutal reality of our existence at the conclusion of Kali Yuga. But they are enacting that viral infection from the archons, which is a paranormal influence coming from outside the atmosphere of the earth. They are enacting it through pretending. And for them, that action is terminal. That pretending that arises from their infection is terminal, and it will eventually eliminate them. And you can see the proof of that now. You can see the widespread evidence in this way. A large number, a countless number of people walking around on the planet today are no longer really human. They no longer have genuine rational faculties of evaluation and assessment. They don't have probity, Probity. Their mental faculties have virtually been extinguished. And not only that, it gets worse. Their very humanity has been distinguished due to the LARPing that they exhibit due to the Archontic infection, you see? And so, what are we going to call these people? Let's think of a name for them. Now, the first name that comes to mind is, they're zombies. They are apocalyptic zombies. They are populating the earth. And the number of apocalyptic zombies is increasing exponentially all the time. So it might be convenient and consistent with Gnostic jargon to call them Archontic zombies rather than apocalyptic zombies, right? But the terms are practically equatable. But I'm going to propose a meme. I'm going to propose a hashtag. And I suggest that you call them Morphies. Now, Morphies is a plural of the word Morphy, Morphy, like Murphy. So there's a new word. And the plural would be hashtag Morphies. So what are Morphies? Well, they are human animals, people, persons, individuals living actually in the world who are no longer truly human. They have morphed into something that is no longer human due to the archontic infection they carry. So they are morphing in front of your eyes, and you will encounter these morphies everywhere you go, and you will be able to observe, and it's no big mystery, that they don't behave in a rational and sane way, nor do they behave in a caring way, in a respectful, grateful way, nor do they respect or observe the reciprocity required to maintain a sane social order. And something else that you will observe about them is that they are in either a state of, let's say, in a kind of passive trance with glazed eyes, or they are in a state of rage. And they rage at you and rage at the world. They are possessed by righteous rage, which convinces them that they are entitled to some attention in a special way. So obviously, social justice warriors are Morphies. They have lost their minds, they have lost their humanity, and let me tell you, they're not getting it back. The condition of the Archontic infection, the Archontic virus, is going terminal at the end of Kali Yuga, and there is nothing that you can do about it. They cannot be saved. They cannot be cured. They are Morphies who have morphed into something that is no longer truly and genuinely human. So there's my contribution, my hashtag, and I invite you to do with it as you will. Now, I don't expect any of you to do my bidding or to do any favors for me or to serve me in any way. But you might stay alert for the possibility that if you do have any acquaintance with social media and with tools like Telegram, you might stay alert to the possibility that hashtag Morphies would show up somewhere. And that would be a wonderful development. That would show that the Gnostic message is actually going out into those media which are in fact the tools for inducing and perpetuating the Archontic infection. So you would see, even in those media, evidence of recognition of the true character of that infection. And wouldn't that be remarkable if it were to happen? Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.